Also, please don't panic buy toilet paper.
They're going to let people go if they're going to survive.
This is absolutely going to devastate the trucking community. No freight, no trucks. You can't be an expert on every topic.
And I'm not an expert in anything.
We do not encourage any crime.
Played this push and pull edging game.
The illusion of choice is more important than the actual choice. Welcome back to Strangers Talking Politics. I'm Alli.
I'm Bethany.
And I'm Jesse.
And today we have just us. So we are going to discuss whatever we want to discuss. My topic and also Jesse's topic happen to be the same. So we're going to meld the two. And it's about the shelves that are going to be empty by the end of May. Ooh, scary music. I have a couple of quotes. Mine was, I don't have his name written down, but it's the chief economic guy at Apollo Global Management who calculated a, quote, voluntary trade reset recession to be at 90% with the Donald Trump tariffs, that will happen. And he predicts by mid-May, the movement of container ships will, and I quote, come to a stop, and that later on in the month, the demand for trucking will grind to a halt. He also stated that nearly 70% of Americans right now are worried about losing their jobs, and it hasn't been that high since the 2008 crisis. And then he also said, quote, if the current level of tariffs continue, a sharp slowdown in the U.S. economy is coming. And then he said he thinks that a decrease in shipping volumes from China to America, a decreased shipping volumes from China to America are currently at 50%, according to Flexport, which is crazy. Also, Please don't panic buy toilet paper. My God, it's made in the United States.
Yeah, right. No, toilet paper we're good on. Just panic buy all your Chinese goods.
Yeah.
Which is everything.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just the start of it. We're already starting to see these reduced purchases, but what Alli and I were talking about before we started the recording was the end of the small order loophole. Was essentially if you were doing a pallet or an order of less than $800, you didn't have to pay the taxes on it.
Yeah, they call that the de minimis exception.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies are going to be impacted by that. They're also closing the loophole for, let's say you want to order it through Canada to get a lower tariff rate, but it's actually sourced from China. They're closing off that loophole as well. It's going to kill a lot of businesses. I mean, they're just, there aren't even factories that can increase production to do this. There's just nowhere to do it. You either have to buy from China or, another country that might have some degree of manufacturing, but they're losing. China's facing the highest tariffs, but a lot of countries are facing these tariffs, and they're not going to have the capacity necessarily to take on all the extra workload.
No, and I saw something, it was like, I think the number was 80% of like businesses in the United States are small to medium-sized businesses. Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, maybe these large billion-dollar companies are going to be fine, but like the small businesses, they're going to have to start laying people off. They can't keep that. Even the medium-sized businesses, your mom and pops, even if they own a couple of stores, they're not a chain. They're not a Walmart, a Target, an Amazon.
Right. Well, and that's why that small order exemption had been good, because it offered some protection for the mom and pop shops. But by closing that loophole, they've effectively guaranteed that only companies with the largest scale can survive.
It's an antitrust nightmare.
Yeah. My girlfriend works for a company that does branded items for other companies all across the U.S. And vast majority of what they order is sourced through China. And when they're trying to sell a branded shirt or any other kind of marketing materials to one of these companies, they're about to have to increase their price by 100+%.
Crazy.
Absolutely. It's a complete antitrust nightmare. What's going to end up happening is massive market consolidation. And what ends up happening with mass market consolidation is now all of a sudden you don't have competition. So you forego price controls, you forego quality, you forego availability, you forego choice. Even Trump himself in the Oval, I don't know if it was today or recently, said, well, yeah, so maybe there will only be 2 dolls on the toy shelf instead of 30. And maybe it'll cost a little bit more, but who cares? It's all worth it. But is it? Is it really worth it, Mr. Billionaire? I paint gold angels and glue them on the wall of the Oval Office. The idea, like so many things with this administration, it is so antithetical to the whole purpose of our country. The idea of our freedom is that we all have a fair shot, or a reasonably fair shot for that matter. The idea of this country is that the wealthy monarchical people don't, oligarchical people don't rule the many by the few. It's to give a voice to everyone. And when you consolidate markets like that, you drive wages down, you drive benefits down,
Yeah.
you drive opportunity down, you paralyze the middle class and the lower classes to a point where now they can't, quote unquote, pick themselves up by their bootstraps.
Well, I mean, like, let's just create a hypothetical marketing company that sells promotional products like we are talking about earlier. If you are a business like that, you have a few primary costs. One of the highest is probably going to be your payroll. That's a controllable cost. Next to that, if you're reselling, essentially you're taking pre-made goods, slapping logos on it or designs on it, and then selling it onward. That inventory is probably your second highest cost. So let's say your payroll's at 30% and your inventory expense is at 35%, that price is going to double for you. Well, all of your customers, they've already set their budgets for the year. They've already decided how much they can afford to spend on experiential marketing or going out to events and having people at trade shows giving out items. The only way that company is going to be able to, the original marketing company is going to be able to stay in business is by laying people off. You can't control how much your inventory costs in this scenario. Your only controllable cost is your payroll, and they're going to let people go if they're going to survive.
Yeah, and then you're going to have a bunch of people who are not making enough money, already aren't making enough money, but then they still have to work at 100%, probably 200%, because now half of their team has been cut, but they can't afford to lose their job. So where are they going to go? Because everybody's going to be laying people off. So there's nowhere for them to even go instead to then work.
Yeah, and to bring another element of this in, as somebody who has experience with the trucking community, this is absolutely going to devastate the trucking community. I don't think which is interesting because a lot of the trucking community votes for Trump. They're not just Republican, they're MAGA. And when you see policies like earlier this week, them saying that they're going to force all foreign drivers to speak English, most people don't understand how performative that is. And most people take that as an indication of power. I take that as an indication of they're shitting their pants. Because
is that a move to cut the size of the workforce before the orders disappear?
I think it's performative, right? Because one of the primary complaints that a lot of white drivers have in trucking is that these quote unquote immigrants come in and they take freight for cheap rates and they can't speak the language and they can't read the signs and, they get in so many wrecks and so on and so forth, right? Basically, they blame all the woes of trucking on immigrants, on the immigrant community. Highly xenophobic, highly racist, all of that stuff is laced in there a lot. Unfortunately enough, what it really means, so let me back up just a little bit. This rule is already on the books. It's been on the books forever. If you want to drive a commercial vehicle in this country, you have to be able to read and speak the English language proficiently enough to have a general conversation with the general public. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you have to be able to communicate effectively. And I think that's
really
a
quickly,
fair rule.
Alli, so we know that the rule has been in place, but I thought I saw somewhere that during the second end of the Obama administration that they sort of pulled back enforcement of it because there was such a shortage of truckers.
I have heard that, but I have not seen anything on paper. And I did some looking into that. The most that I could find on that at some point was that there was a reassessed guideline sheet that was released to specify how the rule was supposed to be employed, but it didn't ever say don't employ or enforce the rule. Now, whether or not states, just quietly didn't comply, I can't answer that, right? Because there's a lot of state enforcement that goes on there. But I do know that it's been on the books. It has been being enforced to some degree or another. And while it's not perfect, and yes, there are drivers out there who are not proficient in English like they should be, I think it's all performative because the idea first of all, this is going to be a fast track to deport people, right? Like it's an immigration play. But then also they are trying to mitigate the damage that they've done to the trucking industry now, right? So the immigrant community makes up about 20% of the trucking community. And so if you can eliminate a large percentage of even that 20%, then it's going to make it look like it's not as bad. So they think. But the fact of the matter is they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're doing, because in essence, what's going to happen is, the ports are already running out of freight. They're already down massively. So no freight, no trucks. Even if you eliminate or consolidate the amount of drivers that currently exist by getting rid of immigrants, that's not going to make rate higher, not significantly enough to offset the lack of a wave of freight that's coming, right? Like there's no ships on the way. And so we're a couple of weeks out from completely bare ports that are already way down. And no matter at that point, it's not really going to matter how many immigrants you eliminate from the workforce. There's just not going to be the freight. And because of that, it's going to force another mass consolidation like we saw during COVID into mega carriers who don't train as well. They don't pay as well. They don't offer the same benefits. They don't advocate for their drivers as well as the middle guys and the smaller companies. And freight rates have been low for a long time. The trucking industry has really been suffering the last couple of years with those low rates. After the big boom during COVID, the market corrected itself. You think the rates were low before, they're about to get even lower. And now you're going to have to take the cheap rate that you complained about the immigrants taking. A big push was saying, don't take cheap freights. Tell these immigrants, don't take cheap freight. Well, you're not going to have an option because cheap freight's all that's going to be available.
So I looked up on the White House website, and it says the order directs the Secretary of Transportation to rescind guidance that watered down the law requiring English proficiency for commercial drivers, and then a whole other bunch of nonsense. And then it says President Trump believes that English is a non-negotiable safety requirement for professionals, and then everything that you just said. And then federal law mandates that commercial drivers read and speak English sufficiently. I can't even. Yet this requirement has not been enforced pursuant to Obama's administration guidance, compromising roadway safety as trucking fatalities have increased since this guidance was issued. Motor vehicle crashes are the leading cause of death, killing over 120 people per day. Now, I would like to say that while that number is correct, 14 is the number of people who actually die involving commercial vehicles. That number they're putting out there to say that it's because people who don't speak English and it's causing 120 people per day to die is incorrect. It's 14 deaths that are caused by commercial vehicles per day, not 120.
And that doesn't even touch on the fact that the majority of those 14 are not the commercial driver's fault.
That was going to be the next thing. Exactly. Like it's, yeah.
So it's easy to get lost in the minutia, because you can't be an expert on every topic. But when it comes to what's going to happen, it's not, these things right now, they're doing this to save face, but I don't think they're going to have a substantive enough difference to offset what they have done with the tariffs. This is all just playing it up. They're just trying to gain favor and see promises made and promises kept. We're with the American trucker, but are you?
I honestly, I think like doing a little bit of this reading and then also just like remembering what happened during the beginning of COVID, I don't know if like this May prediction is right, because what I think is going to happen is the same thing that happened during COVID. And I think that no matter the price, people are going to panic buy. They're going to go to these stores and they're going to buy a bunch of shit, which is going to wipe out the shelves. So these businesses are going to order more stuff because people are buying them at this new high rate because they need them. And then that's when it's going to hit, because now there's going to be a bunch of shit on the shelves that people can no longer afford. So I don't know, and I'm not an expert in anything, but like my thought process is like, I don't know that necessarily the shelves are going to be empty so much as they're going to be full of stuff that people can't buy because people have already panic bought what they could. And now they're stocked up at home. And now for the same product that they were going out and buying for $20, you're asking $40, $50, $60 because it's 120, whatever the fuck percent tariff now. It's like now people aren't buying that and they have a backstock of it at home now. So now you're going to have these businesses with a shit ton of inventory that they can't sell. And like, I saw a lot of people too who were like, this is also just going to make crime increase because people aren't going to be able to afford their basic necessities at the store. They're just going to start stealing. And like, not for nothing, fuck Walmart. Like, if you have to go to Walmart and steal fucking food because you can't afford to feed you or your kids, fuck Walmart. Like, steal the food. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Just to preface, we do not encourage any crime of any
yeah. So
kind.
sorry.
These are all just personal feelings. We don't actually mean it. Don't go steal from Walmart.
Well,
However,
it's
we get
this house of cards that's going to collapse. The trucking industry is one of those keystone industries in the United States, and like let's talk about the smaller independent farmers. If you've got your truckers that are all being forced to go work for these massive conglomerates because they can't pick up independent jobs anymore, well, down the line, when those independent small businesses that were able to bid out on smaller jobs need a customer, now they can only go to the conglomerates as well. And it's going to cost them more money. And then that's going to hurt the small farmers that, maybe have those shorter hauls because the people that used to haul for them are either out of the business or working for a big conglomerate now.
Yeah, it's a proliferating problem. And while I know a lot of people say, well, Trump said he's going to back off on the tariffs. Well, that doesn't mean that China will, right? And who could blame them for not, to be honest, at this point? We have set them up to take over primary dominance in global trade. And they're like, well, I mean, if that's what we got to do, and that's what they're doing, they're making deals right and left with everybody else, cutting us out of the equation altogether. We've seen it with pork. We've seen it with rare earth. We've seen it with agriculture. And so it becomes a real issue because even if we reverse our tariffs, that doesn't mean that China will. And even if China does, the damage that has already been incurred just by this 1 month of bullshit is going to take a really long time to correct. And so when you were talking about the statistics of, I think it was JP Morgan saying that, they put our global recession indicator, prediction at like what, 60% or 80% or whatever it was. That's why.
And it also just like, it makes me think about, based on a conversation that was had earlier today, it makes me think about like the amount of people that are now going to be homeless because there's going to be a bunch of people who get laid off. There's going to be a bunch of people who lose their houses or their apartments or whatever. And it's like, not for nothing, but like America is not known for treating their homeless people great. And it's like, there's so many things that this is going to affect that is more than just these businesses are not going to be able to afford their stuff. It's like you have like Jesse said, you have people that who have a small business that are going to be affected. They're not going to be able to make money. They're going to have to lay off their friends, people they've worked with, people that have helped them grow their business. And now they're forced to let these people go or bankrupt their business and then still let these people go. You're going to have people who are losing their homes, losing their kids, who are going to start using drugs or drinking because what else? Like they need something to heat. There's so many things that this affects. And like you said, yeah, maybe he does, or somebody smacks him in his fucking face and is like, hey dude, you got to back off on these. He's already played this push and pull edging game with everyone that like, they're not backing down now. They're pissed.
Well, what they're going to do is consolidate the market. And this has never been about MAGA or, isolationism or protectionism. It's about consolidating the market for the largest companies. You saw Amazon back down on their threat to put the tax increase on their website because they do understand that this is beneficial to them. If you're a small bookstore owner, I mean, you're already seeing your book prices go up because the tariffs on paper. And so your books are costing more. All those side items that your bookstore sells, those Funko Pops or whatever, people buy when they go to their bookstore, those all come from China. All that stuff is going to cost exponentially more for those small independent bookstores. And they're competing with like Amazon, who is already able to buy at massive discounts to any independent business. And it will drive more and more small businesses into the ground. And when we come out on the other end of this, it's going to all get scooped up by Amazon and a few other large companies.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Jesse. All this is just to recreate COVID conditions, right? Because we saw the largest transfer of wealth happen during COVID. So this is the surefire way to to revisit that, to go back to those conditions so that this time those large companies will be prepared for it. They've all liquidated and they're ready to buy. They
Yeah,
are
I mean, let's
ready
get real. This is wealth redistribution. It's what it is.
in the wrong direction. And so for all of the complaints about, well, you can't distribute wealth and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's what's happening. Just the other way around.
Well, yeah, and my partner has talked about that too, like with the 2008 financial crisis or whatever with like housing, how like the distribution, a bunch of wealthy people were able to then buy property and become landlords. And the same thing with COVID. You had a bunch of people who the houses were selling for cheap and a bunch of people came in and bought them for really, really high, which redistributed it. Like, I think I've mentioned it before, but like there's someone in my neighborhood who owns like 3 or 4 houses just in our neighborhood and they're all Airbnbs, and it's like, that's crazy. Like it's just happening again just now with businesses. And like you said, Amazon can take over for anybody. They can take over for all of like the mom and pop businesses. They can take over for like your Barnes and Noble or all of these places, because everyone's going to have to funnel there, so they can probably still keep things relatively cheap because they can compete. Whereas, like you said, other people can't. They can't keep their costs down by buying huge bulks of items because people are forced to go and buy there. It's really fucked up and shitty.
I'm going to be interested to see what happens, like if Amazon creates a wholesale division out of this and starts just wholesaling to all of those mid-level businesses. That's what I'm interested to see, because that's, to me, that seems like the capitalist play, right? Because
like they become the
if
third
you
party.
don't, so like Barnes and Noble would buy from Amazon instead of buying from China at a slightly higher rate.
Amazon specifically doesn't do that because then you're getting into some monopoly issues. But what they do is they allow those other businesses to sell on their sites, and then they become the primary manufacturer of good selling products and then promote their version of it. So if you have the misfortune of having to use Amazon as a retailer, if you do well, Amazon's going to disincentivize your products in favor of their own because they are handling the manufacturing. They don't need to do that direct to store type thing, or because all the consumers will just buy it directly from them.
So do you think that they're gonna become maybe like a mix of that? Like they won't be like what Alli said, where they're becoming the people that someone goes and buys from, but they're essentially going to be like the domain holder of like the website of like, yeah, you may not have a brick and mortar, but you can sell through us, and then they're taking a cut from all of these different companies.
Well, they already do that. And then if you are successful with them, then they create their own version of it and promote that.
Yeah, the items with like every letter of the alphabet and just like random tags in the name.
Right. And it's not just that, but like, let's look at, I'm familiar with the book industry because I own a bookstore, but an independent bookstore trying to order something from like, let's say Simon & Schuster, you get a pretty decent discount going directly if you do a large order directly from the publisher. But oftentimes Amazon has negotiated deals that are below what the independent bookstores get going directly from the publisher. I mean, I've talked to bookstore owners who will order a book off of Amazon to sell in their bookstore because it's cheaper to do it that way than to buy it directly from the publisher.
Which is cuckoo bananas.
But that's exactly what I'm talking about, Jesse. That's exactly what I'm saying, is that's a version of wholesaling, basically, is what it is, right? And I wonder oftentimes if they will move more into that because the illusion of choice is more important than the actual choice, right? People need to feel like they have the Barnes and Noble to go to and support because fuck Amazon, even though Barnes and Noble is getting everything from Amazon, right?
Do you think that they would just make, like, instead of it being something where they go to Amazon, couldn't he just make a new wholesale company and then technically he's not monopolizing? Like, I'm sure there's some sort of shitty loophole that would allow him to do that.
I mean, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and things you can do with that, but I think at this point it doesn't even really matter, right? Because the Trump administration has made it clear that they're not going to prosecute antitrust. They're not really going to prioritize it like Biden did with Lena Khan. by the time new representation gets in, the damage will have been done.
Yeah, we're gonna be fucked.
They could go after antitrust, but it's not going to matter because there's the only people that are going to be able to afford to break that up are the people that have all the money that was already consolidated. So it's just going to be a big circle jerk. Pardon my language. Sorry.
Yeah, not me like throwing 7 F-bombs out and you apologizing for your language.
I'm a trucker, so I tend to get a little carried away. But yeah, so I mean, it's a mess. Like the whole thing, damage is done. Even if everybody completely reverses course right now, I think it's too late. The consolidation is going to happen because how many of these mom and pop stores are not going to be able to even weather a month of hard sales because they're so leveraged, right? They're so leveraged on brick and mortar. They're so leveraged on inventory. They're leveraged in every way they possibly can be.
What's wild is that this is sort of why Trump got into office. Because if you look at what's been happening to mom and pop stores and what's been happening to the economies of these smaller communities, it's been headed this way. And they thought, well, under the Democrats, there's more globalization. We're seeing these big companies continue to grow. And maybe if we blow it all up with this Trump guy, something else will happen. Because he said he would fix it. But now he's just amplifying it. He's speeding it up.
Blow it all up is the key term, right? Because there are a lot of people who literally are thinking in those exact terms. Maybe if he just blows it all up, it'll get better. But that's not the way it works, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there's something to be said for the allure of just demolish it all and let's start over. But that minimizes the 200 and some odd, the centuries of strife and effort and death and violence and all kinds of things that this country had to go through just to get here to the place of comfort where we are now. That's one of the reasons that I'm not anti-capitalist, right? Because I just don't see a practical way to completely dismantle a capitalist society in a globe, a world that is capitalist, and then just start over without massive loss of life, without massive hardship and decades of it. And so, I don't like it. But I am not willing, personally, myself, I'm not willing to sacrifice those people. These are my neighbors. These are the people I care about. These are you guys. This is me. This is everybody I live around. And, these people matter to me. So I would rather work with what I have and fix it and work really hard to fix it as best as we can than take the quote, blow it all up.
Right, but okay, so Alli, you want to fix it.
What's
Who
that?
Can you vote for that wants to fix it? Because you've got, the Trump people lying and saying they want to fix it when they're really blowing it up. And then you've got the other side that says everything's okay. Everything's fine. When in reality, it's just been going this direction more slowly. This delusional idea that our economy is good, that inflation wasn't terrible, that our small towns aren't dying all across this country.
Well, I think we have, I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago, right? When we were talking about dirt road progressives. I think that this is a unique opportunity because, disruption creates opportunity, right? And, this is just my intuition, so take it with a grain of salt. I don't have any, hard resources to back any of this. This is just my intuition kicking in. But I feel a groundswell of everyday people like the three of us here, like the people that we're talking to, that are just absolutely fed up with everybody. They've just had it with everybody. I think that's why the Democrats can't get any traction, even though Trump is so heinous. You tell me a time in history when both the Republicans and the Democrats have had equally poor reception in the polling, right? Like they're both really shitty right now. Neither one of them is performing well. When the Democrats have every opportunity to just kind of do the bare minimum and they could be a shining star on the hill, and they're still not. Because the people see it for what it is and we're sick and tired of it. This country is ready and is dying and begging for massive change.
Yeah, but for the change to happen, anyone who has backed Trump needs to be gone. They can't hold office. We can't do what was it, the Nuremberg trials? My partner talks about this. He's more knowledgeable than I am. But like you can't just let a bunch of people say, "Oh, I was just following orders. I'm so sorry," and let them keep their roles. Because what's going to happen? They're just going to continue to follow orders no matter what they are. And like they all need to go. Like it needs to be overhauled. Like I understand wanting to work with your neighbors and rebuild, but like they all need to fucking go. Like we can't do this because we're going to end up in the same situation again.
I see that and I understand what you're saying, and to some degree I agree, but there's the practical side of me that says that's never going to happen, right?
Mhm.
These are the people that are there and we're going to have to work with them to some extent, but to what extent is up to us. And Jesse brought up a good point. Well, who do you vote for? Well, you know who you vote for? You vote for the one of us that decides that we're just going to do it whether we have the money or not. We're just going to get up there and we're going to fucking do it. And it's hard because the system is rigged against us, right? We don't have the money, we don't have the time, we don't have the resources to support ourselves. But that's where the grassroots movement comes into play. It's where the groundswell of people who are just fed up pull together and they take care of this person and they make sure this person is cared for and has their necessities taken care of while they get out there to the people and they do the work, right? They pound the pavement, they go on the dirt road.
Yeah, but we need someone to do that.
We do, and we
Yeah.
haven't yet seen who's going to step up to do that, but I do believe we will. I just don't know when.
Yeah.
Part of the issue is, and I think we need to keep this in mind when we're talking about, what we're going to be doing down the road, is the left and the progressive left are the minority. And I think a lot of the values of the progressive left are great, but there is a significant majority of this country that voted for Trump or don't care. And if the idea is we can't work with those people, it's going to be a lot easier for them to say they don't want to work with us.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, right? Like, because when it comes to the people who voted for Trump, I'm not a scrap 'em kind of person, right? I'm like, all right, we're just going to have to figure it out. There are going to be people that we're not ever going to be able to get through to, but then there will be plenty of people who we won't have to worry about it because his policies are going to do that job for us. When it comes to the politicians, that's a different story. Right. And I think that the more of us, I had this idea, let me just float this, and maybe this will kind of explain where I stand on it. I had this idea a while ago, and I know it's probably wildly impractical, but I'm just going to throw it out there because, whatever. I thought to myself, what if we had for 2026 or even 2028? What if we got together and we ran candidates in every congressional seat? Every single one that was available, which is all the House seats and however many of the Senate seats, right? And these people signed a contract or a verbal agreement, some kind of a binding agreement that said, we are going up there to accomplish this goal, this goal, this goal, and this goal for the people. Campaign finance, we're going to tackle it and we're going to make it so that it's publicly funded, or we're going to make it so that big corporations can't donate, right? The things that people can 100% agree on across the board. Politicians cannot individually trade stocks while they're in office. There's a handful of those issues. And if those people were to say, listen, we're going to go up there, we're going to get it done. We're going to have, if you give us the 2/3 majority, we can override the veto. And as soon as we get those things done, then we're going to resign. And now we can start over. Now we can have the professional politicians can come in and, they can do whatever they do, they can work from there. But I think that we could do it. I think it would be really hard. And, of course, it's just kind of my dream, but that's
Part
what
of
I
the
think
issue
it
is you have
takes.
to replace everyone. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to replace MAGA, you have to replace the left, you have to replace,
Yeah.
let's say
You gotta
that there's
everybody gets
150
primary.
people in Helena working in the state house and Senate, and maybe 2 or 3 of them out of the entirety would even consider doing something like that.
It would have to be citizens, right? It would have to be the citizenry that knows absolutely nothing about how to do those jobs that would step up and say, I'm going to go up there and we're just going to get it done. And then I'm going to resign because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but those things need to happen. And these people aren't going to do it unless we just do it ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, but to
Like
do
I
that
said,
type of stuff,
it's
you have
just
to
an
have
idea.
primary safe Democrats and safe Republicans, and you have to have Republicans primary safe Republicans. I mean, look at Missoula. Like almost every one of those seats is a safe seat. I mean, are you going to primary Jonathan Carlin? Are you going to primary Wills Curdy because they're a little bit too hunky-dory with the lobbyists and looking out for themselves, or you let them skate because they do pass some good bills?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about it. It's it's so depressing to talk about and think about. And all of this, just I started seeing the stuff about the shelves being empty, and it just reminded me of the beginning of COVID when everybody was panicking, and then you had all of the stimulus checks that came, and it was that I think was probably when at least the people that I knew were like the happiest because you were able to work. You were probably working from home. You were getting your stimulus checks. There were halts on like student loans and like you couldn't be evicted. And like there were all of these like good things that were happening. And then it was just like, now we're just back on this like downhill trajectory of dog shit.
Oh yeah, we're going to get to do all that again, except we're not going to have stimulus checks or no eviction clauses or postponements on student loans if and until the public finally gets uncomfortable enough, right? Which I don't think is going to take very long. I think by middle of summer, we're there.
I think there's just going to be a lot of protests. There's going to be a lot of like walking in the streets, like not to compare this to the suffering of Black people, but like the Black Lives Matter movement, where there were a lot of protests and a lot of things like that. And that's kind of also my fear, is that like we saw what happened with those, not the protests, but the reaction to the protests. My only like kind of like, okay, maybe it won't be as bad, is because hopefully it'll also be a bunch of white people who are in on it. But the police aren't there to protect the people, they're there to protect capital. So it's just going to be a bunch of people who are going to get really rightfully angry, and they're going to protest because that's all we can really do. And then you're just going to have a bunch of violence and chaos, and it doesn't help anybody except the people who already are wealthy. And like that's what it all comes back to. And not for nothing, but everyone who voted for him, you voted for someone who very, very proudly, outly, publicly does everything for money. And you're surprised that now his entire everything he's doing in his presidency is revolving around getting himself and his friends more money. Like, how are you shocked by this?
I just wonder how long it's going to take for those people to get out in the streets, right? I tend to think that it will be the MAGA base that might potentially hit the streets first, because when you look at it, the Democratic base is generally more financially savvy. They're generally more financially secure. So while we're going to struggle and a lot of us are going to lose the very little bit that we have, I think MAGA is in a worse place, and I think they're going to lose it faster.
But I don't think they would ever go against him. The people who are still dieharding for him, they're never going to turn against him. I don't think there's anything he could do at this point that would turn them. Because if you haven't turned against him at this point, what has to happen?
Well, and how many of those people, you have to wonder too, like how many of those people that are still holding the line, right, that are still Uber supporters, it's a new excuse every day, because that's the cult mentality. Is they're in so deep now that to reverse course forces them to recognize they have culpability. And it means that they're going to have to take responsibility for this. And so when you're faced with a choice of, oh my God, this is my fault, or hold the line and it'll get better eventually, he promised, what are you going to choose?
Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying the show so far and would like to be a part of the conversation, visit us at stppod.com. That's stppod.com. Oh God, I feel like this was such a good conversation, but also slightly depressing.
Well, I think before we get too far into it, I think we need to offer some kind of hope, right? Because there is hope to be had. This is where community becomes exceptionally important. This is where building your community base so that you can all support each other is now more important than ever.
Yeah, and I think too that with all of this happening, I think get out and meet your neighbors. And also there are, like, I garden, I make my own bread, things like that. Get to know your neighbors, find your neighbors who have chickens or things like that. And it's like, if you can make bread and your neighbor has chickens, you guys can barter. Like you do what you can to help each other. Have a community garden. If somebody in your neighborhood has like a nice big backyard that they're willing to be like, all right, let's do a community garden. And it's a bunch of people getting together and you make a schedule, and that's where you're getting your fresh like vegetables and stuff. There are a lot of things that you can do. It just takes work, and you have to go out and you have to get to know your neighbors and your people. And my people with social anxiety, I'm with you. I get it. It's terrifying, but like you have to, because shit's going to hit the fan, and the only people who are going to be there for you are the people who are just in it with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's bad. Yes, it'll probably get a lot worse, but you couldn't have had the New Deal and FDR without Hoover. And just think how great the next one's going to be with how bad Trump is.
That is also the hope for me too, right? Is that the worse he breaks it, the better we can fix it. It's going to be a lot of hard work, but this is the time where we just roll up our sleeves. Americans are not foreign to hard work. We know how to get down in the dirt and get stuff done. And so we will, but for now, circle your people, get your people in place, have your support systems ready. We will weather the storm, and as always, the STP pod will be here to give you some insight and some options on how to stay up on everything, but also how to survive it.
Absolutely. And we will try to get episodes out to you guys every week, and we will update on all of our socials. So if you are not following us on TikTok or Blue Sky, that is where we update the most. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and just stay positive, and we will catch you in a week with some strangers. Ooh.
We're all in this together.
Yeah, play High School Musical. Yes, we got the bye.
There you go.
We'll see you next. Bye.
Bye.